So good afternoon and welcome, welcome to our latest in our Ask the Expert series. I'm Lee Hopwood, I'm the CEO here at the CCMA, and we've done a few of these Ask the Experts and they seem to be very popular. The one today is about using AI to analyse customer conversations for insight, and I am delighted to share with you who our experts are going to be. So our experts are Jagrit Malhotra from Clarabridge, and Jagrit has been in the world of business intelligence and CX analytics for several years, and is the MD here at Clarabridge. Clarabridge, you might have seen on the emails and on the website that they've been named a leader in 2 Forrester Wave reports in 2020. One was the customer feedback platforms and one was the AI-based text analytics platforms. So great to have Jagrit and the Clarabridge team here today. We also have our expert, Nick McFarlane. So Nick, he is the head of CX at Sky in Spain. And he's been leading award-winning innovative programs in the world of AI for quite some time. And in fact, last year, won an award at the European Contact Center and Customer Service Awards for digital experiences. So great to have Nick on board, and looking forward to the story he's going to share a little bit later. And the third person we've got joining us today is Marco Cruz-Galva, who he has been in data analytics for years, and he's a recognized expert in the world of AI and CX. And these days at Clarabridge, using all of that knowledge and experience, he leads on the innovation behind the CX AI projects at Clarabridge. So it'll be great to tap into his expertise as well. So just before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, you guys are all on mute, and that's more than anything to make sure that we've got a great noise quality. It is an Ask the Experts, so I am inviting you to please ask your questions. What's going to happen is we're going to hear a little bit from Nick and from Jagrit and the team, just to really set some scenes and to share some of their insight and stories. And then from there, we'll then open it up to the floor. Of course, I have some questions ready and waiting, but we obviously want to hear your questions too. So the way that you ask the questions is please use the Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please ask those questions away, and we will try and get to as many of them as we can. At the end of the session, we will gather those questions, and we will look to come back and answer them if we haven't been able to answer them in the next hour. So without further ado, if I could please invite Jagrit to join me on screen. He's just going to find the video button and the mute button.
There we go.
Jagrit, how are you doing?
Good, good, thanks. And you, Lee? Good,
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. And obviously the world of CX and AI is the world that you live in. So I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about Clarabridge, and to introduce Nick and Marco.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lee, for having us, and thank you all for joining. I think, you know, in the interest of time, I think you did a great introduction for Clarabridge. So I won't bore you with any more vendor speak. I think it might make sense to get started right away with a few thoughts from Nick. And we've had the pleasure of working with Nick at Sky over the past few years. And he really is one of the most innovative and creative practitioners that we've had the pleasure of working with in the arenas of customer experience and the contact center, and specifically really the confluence as those two areas are coming closer and closer together. And what we loved about working with Nick is he has this real skill in being able to take and apply new technologies, and both analytical technologies as well as operational technologies, and drive business outcomes, drive business value from them. So with that brief introduction and with no pressure added on, Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Jagrit. What an introduction. I hope I can live up to that kickoff. So, you know, pleasure to be here today talking to you guys. Thanks to the CCMA and thanks to Clarabridge for having me. I wanted to just share, if we could go on to the next slide, please, Sarah, some of my experiences with Sky Spain, where essentially I set up our contact center and then turned that into a real CX hub for our entire business in Spain. And the talk is about, using AI to analyze customer conversation to get insight. And I think, it's great that the contact center becomes the source of that. And I think unlocking conversational insight is definitely a game changer. If you can do that in the contact center, you're onto something really special, because it's the richest source of customer insight you will ever have. If you can tap into it quickly and effortlessly, I truly believe there is no limit on what you can find out about what your customers think about the whole width and breadth of your proposition or your service. And importantly, I think for the contact center guys out there, is if you get it right, you can really shift the value dynamic within your organization of your operation and get the whole business viewing you as really a resource that adds something to everything, rather than, sadly, that traditional, contact center is a cost base that we need to manage. So if we go on to the next slide, just a little bit about why I say I think the contact center is the richest source of insight. And it's quite simple. If you think about any conversation you have at any time, you always talk about more than the intended subject of the conversation. So if you're harvesting every single conversation you have in your contact center, across your social media, any other digital channels that you have, you get this insight on such a breadth of topics that you can become relevant and useful to all the business areas within your organization. Then, because this is all AI driven, you've got a speed of delivery that simply can't be matched by a traditional survey or a customer focus group, where, I'm sure you've all been in the position where you're like, oh, I want to know the results of our joiner survey for August, but I can't get it until at least mid-September. And, some of that stuff is gone then. With what we're doing with Clarabridge, we get this insight updated overnight and updating every 24 hours. And then you add in the ability to understand things like sentiment and emotion along with those conversations. And you can use these things together to tell a really powerful story about what your customers think of you. So if we go on, I truly believe it's like a survey on steroids. And, that sounds a bit cliched, but, it's all back to that breadth of understanding. And, I now challenge my teams to find a topic they want insight on that isn't covered somewhere in our customer conversations with the contact center. And this little dashboard image there is just one that we set up to help drive that engagement. It is literally a word search of all the stuff we've got. And people can just plug any word in there and they will see where in the customer journey people are talking about that, where it's important, where it comes up about content, what emotions are there for that word. And that's been really important, getting people engaged and interested in what we're trying to do. So we go on one more. Just wanted to say a little bit about the three main use cases that we have for AI-driven conversational analytics in Sky Spain. The first one, and we'll go into more detail on each, and Marco will add a little bit on how it works, is enterprise-wide customer experience insight. So it is not limited to what people are saying to the contact center for the sake of improving the contact center operation. It's about improving our whole business, our end-to-end journeys, our whole processes. You can then get into a really interesting world within the contact center itself around quality assurance, and what has traditionally been a sort of manual exercise where a team leader picks 3 or 4 conversations a week and goes through a scorecard with the agent to see how they're doing. You can automate all of that and get stuff out of every single conversation in near real time, which makes that whole process a whole load more efficient, but also I think more interesting. And then the third one is something that I'm really proud of, and it's it's quite new, and it's something we've just been playing with recently, which is emotion tracking in the contact center. So, we all know that the peak end rule suggests that, customers' emotions and the ones that are the highest and the ones that they end with are what form their memories of that interaction. So it's pretty cool that we can track that. And as that changes through an interaction with one of our advisors, take notes on what we need to do better through that sort of thing. So those are the three main use cases. And if we go on to the next slide, I'll be saying a little bit more about the enterprise-wide insight that we gather. So just, I can go into hours of detail on this, but in the interest of time for this, it's just a collection of screenshots of dashboards that we have that sort of show the three levels of detail that we can go into. So everyone in our organization gets an executive summary, which kind of shows us where the conversations are coming from, whether that's the contact center, our social media, some of our surveys, what the biggest customer highlights are, because I think it's always important to look at positives as well as negatives, what the biggest pain points are, where in the journey most conversations are happening, which business areas are driving most conversations. We then can dive deeper into a specific area. So this example is for our product team, and we can look at things like, how's the e-commerce site performing? What are people saying about that? The actual product features themselves, what are people saying about that? The My Account area, also important, same sort of thing. And we get a sense of volume of comments about a particular area and some of those other metrics, emotion, sentiment around them. And then the third thing, you can deep dive at any specific topic you want. So we launched the Apple TV app for our service in Spain recently. Very simple view of how many contacts about it, where do they peak, what channels are they in, and then sort of what types of conversations they're driving. So hopefully building this picture for you that it really is something that goes across the whole organization. And Marco, I think you're up next with a little bit of how that works.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick. Okay, here we go. So how do these dashboards leverage AI to provide the right level of insights? First, across all industries, we see a shift in how interaction or conversational analytics can best provide value. No longer is the emphasis on how customers react to an interaction or experience, but rather the focus is on the intent, and like Nick mentioned earlier, how to create an effortless experience. This helps provide a more proactive customer interaction, personalized experiences, and also bring or create stronger insights that can help evolve or create stronger products and services offerings. Looking at the example that we have on this slide, right? This is an example of a conversation or an interaction where AI comes into play in different ways. First, through more basic text analytics, like Nick mentioned, we can identify key areas of conversation, reasons for contact, or different pain points that customers go through during their experience, right? One of the advantages of conversational analytics is that you have the whole conversation, a dialogue between the agent and the customer, and that helps through machine learning features. It helps identify different ways of how customers talk. But we see that to unlock meaningful interaction analytics or conversational analytics, we can focus on other things as well, things that can be just automatically identified. For example, customer effort, intent, emotions, and a lot of these features and functionalities that are basically engined through AI come through natural language understanding. In the example below, we can see that exchange of conversations between an agent and a customer. Automatically, AI can help you identify things like which company are they mentioning? So thinking about your own company in different industries, or also thinking about competitors, but also identifying that we know that, for example, in this case, the customer is saying that their service is down. We know there's a service outage, which could be tackled through text analytics. We can also identify automatically that the customer has already contacted the department several times and no one has been able to help them, right? So the intent of the call is a cry for help to make sure that we are able to understand that this customer has asked for help and that they're experience needs to be easier, right? They are also using emotions, like Nick mentioned and showed in one of the screenshots. The frustration in this case is accentuated by an adverb that says that it is incredibly frustrating. So a lot of these different basically features or functionalities are being more commonly used across all industries with this type of conversational analytics channels, to make sure that either if it's chatbots or contact center, that taking advantage of the richness of the conversations, that you can truly identify what the intent of the customer is and anticipate basically what their needs and wants are. If we go to the next slide, one of the interesting things about this, right, is that it is common that for many organizations, leveraging different type of metrics like NPS or satisfaction is basically the way to go, right? It's metrics that are commonly used, and the limitation, like also Nick mentioned this, the conversation analytics is like a survey on steroids. The limitation of NPS or satisfaction is that these are metrics that are limited to only specific channels, and also they are not consistent across the different touch points of the customer journey, right? Through AI, you can start leveraging other type of metrics, like for example, sentiment, which can help you identify how customers feel across different areas of conversation or different touch points during their customer journey, and can help better anticipate how a customer will do during different moments of truth or their experience. Now, leveraging another layer, emotion and effort, these are metrics or basically ways for you to understand a customer that can help you get to the next level. Through emotion, you can truly identify pain points. And we will see in a later example from Nick, how he leverages emotion against also these other metrics like NPS, to see how through understanding the emotion, you can understand what are the things that work or drive joy or happiness versus what's driving frustration, anticipation, or confusion during the customer experience, that can help you identify ways for you to help them better self-serve, or basically create a more proactive way of interaction to help them be able to resolve an issue without too much pain. And effort, right? Effort can help you identify different areas that create higher friction or confusion, but also it helps you identify how a customer could be prevented from resolving an issue on their own, or also help identify drivers of channel hopping, right? So we've seen with a lot of customers in different industries that understanding effort can help identify areas to drive call deflection, or also to reduce the contact from customers to make it a more effortless experience. Back to you, Nick.
Great, thanks, Marco. So the next use case just wanted to have a quick look at was quality monitoring in the contact center. As I touched on briefly up front, I think it's something that can make you far more efficient as an organization. And this is just a very quick example of what we're doing in Sky Spain at the minute. So it's quite a simple dashboard. You see a bar chart on the left, you see the actual chat conversations on the right. But what you can do, essentially, we took our scorecard that we normally used for quality monitoring and we built a dashboard around it, which sort of Marco will show you a little bit how in a minute. And then you can see, so which advisors have things flagged that they're not doing quite right against the scorecard, and then which flags it is, read the actual conversation, so you can get much quicker to the challenge of where do we need to get better, and take away that view of, well, from the advisor, you only look at the ones that I do badly at, because this is looking at everything. So in the live dashboard, I can pick a flag, I can pick a advisor, and I can see all the different things in there. So Marco, back to you just a little bit on how that works.
Thank you, Nick. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the aim of AI to improve quality monitoring is going from leveraging a quantitative measure that basically, if you can see from this slide, right, the left picture shows you some survey questions or basically different parameters that a customer is asked to basically rate their experience on. One is the bigger picture, for example, like is the agent or the advisor demonstrating passion and belief in the products or services they're promoting? And also basically if they are creating a positive or memorable impression. So the limitation with the quantitative measure approach, right, is that you're basically limited to a yes, no, or rating on a specific experience. On the right side, right, when we start leveraging more of that AI related features, you can start focusing on measures that provide a qualitative view and basically create opportunities to create more proactive coaching. In this case, you can see an example of the type of models that were created to create automatic tagging and enrichment. So basically based on, like I mentioned earlier, different types of patterns of conversation of how customers talk that then can later on be enriched and can be improved to train basically how we flag or understand or score the interaction of these agents to make sure that, one, we have a deep understanding of how customers talk, right? The language that they use, and also that we are measuring and flagging all of these interactions in a consistent, holistic, unbiased and transparent method that's not limited just to the typical approach that we see with a lot of the contact center analytics, right? That's limited to recent codes or just a set of parameters that an agent is scored on. So this allows you just to create, right, a more dynamic way for you to understand how customers might be expressing how they feel about an interaction. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, create that personalized experience. That's a key factor to ensure that you're creating or providing tailored services and products that customers will love. Back to you, Nick.
Nick, you might be on mute.
I was struggling to get to the mute button. Apologies, everyone. So yeah, the last use case is emotion tracking. As I said, it's one that we've been playing around with a little bit. If you go on to the next slide, please. This is just a sort of a view of the dashboard that we use in this space. I don't know if we can go on the next slide. And what it's trying to show is the evolution of emotions through the conversations with the contact center. So it's cobbled together a little bit, some various bits, but you get the emotions that are most prevalent. And if I click on confusion, which is the biggest one, I get to see that during the call, so the bottom right graph, 4 quartiles of the interaction, confusion is at its highest and it gets lower as we go through the call. That's suggesting to me that advisors are doing a great job of solving the customer's issues. And as I said, we can then pinpoint down to the different themes, the different contact reasons, and look at how that evolves for different things. The other example that's great on this is, I've said confusion goes down, happiness goes up as well. So, just an indicator that the guys are doing a good job, and there's so much potential in here to use emotion to better understand how you're interacting with your customers. And I think Marco's got a few more words on how that works.
Yes, thank you, Nick. So I think what I like about this dashboard, right, it shows that concept of the value of early indicators of loyalty that I shared before. Going back to Nick's example about confusion, right, emotion tracking is being used in different conversation analytics channels, like anything from call center chats, chatbots for faster issue resolution, right? Understanding that if a customer is confused, it doesn't necessarily mean also a bad thing. It could be a loyal customer that's basically anticipating or that is confused about the launch of a new product or a new service that they want to acquire. So emotion tracking really helps you be more proactive to make sure that you can support or provide the knowledge or the information that the customer needs to be able to make a decision, right? So if a customer is angry or frustrated, to make sure that that issue resolution is faster. And also if you're experiencing a customer that's loyal and that's portraying a lot of love, happiness, or surprise about an experience, right? That you can also even upsell or provide rewards for these exceptional experiences to the customer. Now, if we go to the next slide, please. I just wanted to give you a bit more of a technical view of how this works and give you also an example of the evolution of intent and effort analytics. So basically, you know, a lot of these terms that we hear about machine learning algorithms, and like I mentioned earlier, natural language understanding, it really helps allow these interactions to be automatically tagged based on patterns. So a lot of the technologies see like a lot of an analysis of how your customers talk for you to be able to develop basically different ways. I'm showing here a few examples of, for example, intent, right? Identifying automatically how customers might be reaching out with a request or a suggestion on how to improve your service or how to make the experience more seamless. Or also on the other side, you know, when your agents or your service or your products are being praised, for this type of things to also come up so you can see what are the areas where you're doing well. On the other side, the same thing as the example that we shared earlier before, and it's on the screen as well. You know, when a customer is really crying for help or they require an extra layer of support for this to be basically automatically tagged. A lot of these machine learning algorithms and AI, what they help is to make sure that this algorithm keeps being retrained, right? As more and more data gets processed, and also as different channels of conversation keep getting processed, you start really learning how customers talk, and it helps this analysis or analytics to be stronger because you understand the way customers change in the way they talk and also the way they provide feedback. And most importantly, it helps you keep on top of your customer expectations. You know, we know that customers, as they evolve, their wants and needs change. So this machine learning approach also helps you make sure that you are on top of how your customers will be interacting with you. On the right side of this screen, right, we go back to the example that I shared in one of the first slides, where we see that the customer is contacting the department several times, no one is able to help. So this type of patterns, right, the system and the technologies are able to start understanding and creating these new type of metrics. For example, we're seeing that previously we were just able to identify when a customer was not having an effortless experience and that the effort was very hard. Now we have also seen the deployment of new metrics that are quantitative as well, you know, assigning different scores for effort. In this case, you can see a -5. So you can start creating also more of these type hard metrics that can be then deployed across organizations for these metrics to have more buy-in and that can be quantified in an easier way. The same thing here we see for intent, the same example that I show you, right, of how we can identify that a customer is crying for help. So just a few examples of how AI is being used right now and how these type of features or functionalities have been evolving. Jagrid, your turn to talk a little bit more about how AI is used for conversational analytics.
Yeah, no, just I guess curious or eager to get into questions. So I think I'll just wrap up by saying everything that Marco and Nick have shown from an analytics and an insights perspective, we want to make sure, and what we see leading edge organizations do is not just use that for analytics, not just use all those AI markers like sentiment, emotion, effort, intent for analytics, but to also use them for optimizing your front-end engagement with customers and consumers, right? So many ways to do that, you know, for example, to go ahead and tag interactions based on all those markers, right? To go ahead and leverage AI and machine learning for theme detection, and really to tag and categorize 100% of interactions, right? So what you see on the right-hand side with all those little colorful markers there are the different tags, the different categorizations that are automatically being applied to interactions as they come in, using that AI capability. And if we move to the next slide, what does that further enable us to do? Once you have those advanced tagging capabilities and those advanced categorization capabilities that leverage AI and ML, then you can go ahead and automate a lot better, assign a lot better, a lot more intelligently. So better and more efficient assignment to agents, assignment to teams, escalations, with the whole goal being to reduce their average handle time, your resolve and response time, through those smarter assignments and actions that leverage AI capabilities that we've been talking about on the last few slides. So that's it from a sort of, I guess, a content perspective, and wanted to hand back over to Lee and Sarah for the questions, I guess.
Thank you very much, Jagrit. And please stay there. And if I could invite Nick and Marco to join us back on screen. We have got some questions already coming into the Q&A window at the bottom of your screens. Please do, if you have more questions, please do pop them in there, and we shall ask away. And great content, some great insight that you shared there. Thank you very much, all three of you. So I am going to go straight into the questions, and I'm going to go with the question that's been asked around ROI. What you've talked about is great, but how can you actually demonstrate an ROI, or in particular the question that was asked, what level of ROI can a company expect from AI speech analytics? And Jagrit, I'm guessing that's probably a question for you.
Yeah, I'll go first, and then I know Nick has some really good specific examples as well. So yeah, it's been interesting, the sort of the evolution we've seen over the last few years in our ability to quantify the ROI, and you know, we've seen a lot of organizations have very sophisticated, you know, models to quantify that ROI, and the ROI very rapidly gets into the multiple hundred percentage points, right? Or not percentage points, hundreds of percentages, right? So 300-400% ROI on the investment as it relates to speech analytics is very easy to find. You're seeing, you know, payback times that are just a few months, right? And what it comes down to, I think, in what we've seen in organizations that are able to quantify this through those models, is there's just so many different use cases that drive that ROI up, right? So we try and bucket those use cases or those ROI drivers into 4 buckets, right? How can we help save money? How can the speech analytics help make more money, reduce risk from a compliance or regulatory perspective, and then also help manage through strategic initiatives, whether it be M&A activity, for example, right? And each of those high-level topics has probably, you know, half a dozen sort of further more detailed ROI drivers in there. How do you, for example, what ROI impact does reducing your average handle time have? Increasing your self-service capabilities, increasing your deflection capabilities, you know, automatic categorization of contacts. So if you add up, you know, I think if you just look at one of those in of itself, it probably isn't a huge ROI. But when you look across the board of all the various use cases that could potentially be supported by speech analytics capabilities, the numbers are really quite staggering, right? You know, again, happy to talk in more detail about some of those financial models that we've used to drive the ROI. Nick, I don't know, anything to add? I know you've got some specific examples from Sky Spain.
Yeah, thanks, Jagrit. I think you know, the important thing you're saying there is to look across the board and to be using this insight enterprise-wide if you can. And we in Spain looked at that in 3 broad categories. So what savings can we make in our contact center through call reduction and better sort of digital help? And then at a more journey level, what can we do in terms of sales uplift? And we had some really strong performance from our performance with partners when we had, you know, we're giving voucher codes away to get X months free. We managed to improve the conversion rate hugely by looking at what customers were saying and improving around it. And then the third one is churn reduction. So always looking at those 3 things, and, you know, not wanting to go into too much of the actual numbers, but we, backing up what Jagrit said, we saw sort of savings to our business in 2019 of about 5 times what we spent on putting the technology in.
Wow, that's a good ROI there. Well, one of the questions, I'm going to move on to some of the other questions. And we've had a couple of questions that have come in looking at quality. And Nick, I'm going to come back to you if I may on this. So one of the questions is, have you replaced your QA team as a result? Or do you use the Clarabridge platform to perform traditional QA as well? And the other question that I think dovetails into this is, do you have people quality checking the output of the AI speech analytics, and what does this involve? So how are you addressing quality, Nick?
So it's a bit of a blend of all of those things. Sky Spain's quite a small business, and it's a sort of acts like a startup within the wider Sky organization. So our contact center isn't huge. So we didn't have a quality team independently. Our team leaders were tasked with doing the quality monitoring. They have replaced their process of listening to, or reading in our case, chats, because it's all digital, and going through the scorecard with an agent 100% with using the dashboard, and they sit and they click through the dashboard with the advisors. And what we've seen there is one of the things I mentioned in the conversation is it just removes the effort of going and finding the calls, finding one that an agent agrees is fair and all of that sort of stuff, because it is looking at everything. We did a huge round with our side contact center manager and the Clarabridge guys of sort of checking we were happy with the output of the dashboards in terms of checking it was right before we unleashed it onto the team leaders and the advisors. And then we haven't done a round since, but we would sort of look to do that semi-regular basis. But we really trust the output of what's getting shown, and the guys don't argue with it too much at all. They trust it and they're happy with it. And the beauty is, if you're seeing something that's flagged, you can go straight to the conversation in the same dashboard. So there's no real wriggle room in that respect to say, well, that flag's not about what this is, because it's right there in the conversation in front of them. So
yeah, it's not a black box, right?
Yeah, if I was running a bigger contact center, I would, from an efficiency point of view, be looking to move towards this sort of approach, because I think it just makes sense.
Thank you. And it's interesting, one of the questions that's coming out, and it's you mentioned it a few times, is all around use cases. So in particular, using AI, what are the best use cases? What are the most valuable use cases? Jagrit, I'm going to come to you first, and maybe Marco can add into that.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it boils down to so there's a whole range of use cases I kind of talked about when we talked about ROI. So reducing the average handle time, increasing first contact resolution, self-service opportunities, deflection opportunities, increasing the revenue because of better sales outcomes. But the thing I like about while that's a broad range of use cases, the core of it is all still the same, which is having a deeper understanding of what's actually happening within the conversation by applying natural language processing and natural language understanding. So really, you can identify any outcome, right? And that outcome might be better sales outcomes from a sales related call. It might be a lower handle time. It might be a better deflection capability or a better self-service capability. You can really define any outcome. And then the idea is going through that really deep analysis of the conversation to figure out what are the successful markers, or the success markers of getting to that outcome, right? What are the traits that an agent is portraying or displaying in a successful sales call? What are the traits that an agent is displaying, or what are the characteristics of a conversation that result in a lower average handle time, right? So those are some of the use cases. I don't know, Marco, you probably have a few more to add on based on your work with clients.
I think the ones you mentioned are probably the most popular ones. I think something to mention is from some of these use cases, we see the same type of correlation with reason codes and disposition codes, where we see that agents or advisors are very limited or think they understand what a customer intent is. And also it helps get to that deeper understanding of what the actual customer problem is. A customer might also be thinking that their problem or their knowledge gap is X. And really, as you start analyzing the conversation and the dialogue, you get to understand that the customer was not able to resolve something because they were not equipped or enabled to understand how to get to that point, right? And the other way around with agents, you can really help identify areas where outside of the empathy and the happiness that the joy that the agents show, it helps you identify how can you empower and train and enable your agents to make sure that you're able to tackle all of these things: average handle time, reduction of average handle time, first call resolution, etc. So a lot of these things that we see from all these conversational analytic channels.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll add to that, Lee, is also, I think the other thing we're seeing a lot of is, I mean, some of the use cases that Marco and I have mentioned have been kind of what you would think of as your more traditional contact center type focus use cases. The other, aspect, and I think the use cases that Nick mentioned, a perfect example of this is using that contact center data, not just for your contact center use cases, but using them for more CX type use cases. How do you use your customer interactions to drive innovation from a product perspective, for example? How do you use your customer interactions to figure out what are the better things you need to be doing to drive customer loyalty up, right? So kind of, again, that confluence of contact center and customer experience use cases is something we're seeing a lot more of.
And can I just add, I think one real specific in that space that might help bring it to life, I completely agree, Jag, is, we've seen a great one with tech issues where, your tech team is looking at, say, their own system generated error logs. So they think a specific error is the biggest and the most impacting. When you start looking at mentions of error codes in your conversational data, you can start telling them, actually, that one you're focusing on, yeah, it happens, but no one contacts us about it. But this one that you're not even focusing on because it's way down the list is getting you like a ton of contacts in social media that are highly public, highly emotively charged, really negative sentiment. And you've got all those levers to tell a story to the guys that need to fix the issue that actually focus on this one, please. And, that then helps all the other things as well.
And Nick, you said right at the top of the call that the contact center is a really rich source of data in that insight. And that's exactly what this AI can do is dive in and find those issues, and whether it's to support building a better customer experience, building a different product set, whether it's about looking at the strategic direction of an organization. But rolling these things out is never easy. Yes, there is a whole potentially a cultural shift into actually getting that insight and using that insight, as well as a cultural shift around actually we're going to start deploying AI. And we've got some questions that are coming through, but and please do, if you've got more questions, please do raise them on the Q&A. But how do you create that culture that actually you can get that insight? And that insight is worth it. How do you build that in an organization? And Nick, I'm going to come to you first on that, if I may.
Yeah, it's really important, as you say, and getting buy-in for what you're doing from the people that matter is always the key to these things. I think there has to be a will in the organization to listen to customers and get better anyway. I've always felt since my days as a customer service advisor that you hear so much, but you never really get the opportunity to share it. So, what we very much set out to do was, go small and simple first. So try and hook in with the relevant people who have an interest and who have a use case that might be supported by what we're trying to do. And, one of the greatest things is, the AI allows you to quantify stuff that you've never been able to quantify before. So, pick a topic, someone that'll sponsor it. Hey, wouldn't it be great if you could know all of this, and then show it to them? And one of the, that sounds really basic, but one of the, my rules when I'm sort of talking about customer experience is you've got to make this stuff engaging and make the people in the organization want to read it. And that's why these dashboards are really strong, right? Because they can appear in someone's inbox in the morning, they look great, and they go straight to the nub of the issue. So, we found across our organization that, we did exactly that. We had workshops with, the product team, the tech team, the marketing team, the across the whole organization, what sort of things do you want to understand? Let's see if we can do this for you. And what you find is they start quite skeptical and oh, it's only going to be issues into the contact center. You're just going to talk to me about issues. And you go away and you think about it and you build it and you come back with this thing that they're like, wow, you can tell me that much? And that sort of sows a seed that trickles through and gets everyone wanting to be involved. The governance is key as well. I deliberately spoke about the 3 levels of dashboards that we have. And also that little sort of search function, right? So we started when we got it right with everyone got the executive summary and everyone got the search function. So they see stuff and then, oh, I wonder if it tells me about that. I can have a little bit of a look. And then you get this sort of peak of interest and you find from just pushing out stuff that you think is interesting. And, we went through probably 6 months of our CX team has found this, you should know this, to here's the drip, to actually, what can you tell us about this? So, you have to be confident in the power of it. You have to, find your allies within the organization. You have to talk about, the fact that it is way more than just contact center insight that you're getting with this tool. But yeah, that's my view on it.
And I'm there were a couple of things that you touched in there around customer journey, and which led kind of nicely onto one of the questions that we've had in. The QA aspect is great, and Marco, I'm going to direct this one to you, if I may. Is there a demonstrable impact on continuous improvement for the customer journey or customer profiling? That's the question that we've had in, which is not too dissimilar to the question that I was going to ask you around how does conversational analytics improve the customer journey? So maybe you can combine those two together, Marco.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the nice thing about this type of data sources, like I mentioned before, it's that it allows you to see a 360 view of the customer experience, right? I think one of the nice things about leveraging this type of data is that it gives you a broader view of what the customers want. So making sure that you can apply that to either QA or the customer journey, it basically helps you not just identify how these different touch points are validated from previous journey exercises that you've been doing, but I feel like it helps you architect how your journeys should be built, right? Because it helps you identify specific experiences or areas that, I mean, we've all been there, right? We think that we understand our customer journeys quite well, and we are always surprised when we see that customers' expectations change or customers want different type of things. So either if it's QA or just a touch point or touch point analytics, this type of sources are really good for helping to validate and start creating your product or your services offerings based on how your customers are talking to you.
Yeah, good shout.
I think a couple of things I'd add to that also is the really nice thing that Marco and Nick did with, for example, Skyspan, and we've seen this with numerous companies doing this, right, is that ability to when you gather the feedback, to organize the feedback across the customer journey, to say, I know this feedback is coming in and it applies to this stage of the journey. This feedback is coming in and applies to this stage of the journey. So very quickly, if you look at your markers, your loyalty, emotion, effort markers across the journey, very quickly you can say which are the breakpoints within the journey, right? And then the other aspect is to like Nick was alluding to, have this be kind of an always on system, right? Which kind of feeds that continuous improvement, right? So this is not something that, you just do once a month. This is something where feedback is coming in every day. It's coming in, it's automatically getting categorized across different levels of the journey. And then where you pick out your problem areas and identify what you need to fix within the journey. Right?
Yeah, good shout. And I think we've got time for one, maybe two more questions. And the question I'm going to ask you, and I'm thinking I'm probably going to come to Marco first. Have you seen or considered using the same tech stack to try and track current emotional state of the workforce? And do you see a potential use case for monitoring cultural state of telephony agents?
We've seen some use cases where basically more like a VOE type of approach can get overlaid against the actual contact center source, right? To be able to understand both sides of the equation. You know? So I think we can see how a customer, an agent follows a script, or how they are showing that empathetic approach to dealing with customers to provide a great customer experience. But on the other side as well, we see how through VOE initiatives, we can also see how these agents feel about the experience that they can provide. So to the earlier examples that we mentioned, you know, emotions or sentiment can also be applied against agents' experience, or basically their feedback, to identify areas where they feel like they are better enabled to resolve, or also if there are, I don't know, we have seen, we can identify topics or areas where they feel like they don't have a decision-making opportunity for them to resolve an issue, or escalation points where they have to rely on other agents or other subject matter experts to be able to better cover specific things. So it helps you identify those type of gaps and basically understand also that cultural aspect of how an agent might feel to make sure that they are doing the right type of job, right?
Yeah, no, that's great. And Nick, have you seen that at Sky? Have you been using it to analyze emotional states of employees, of colleagues?
We haven't, sadly. It's something that I've thought about when looking at the customer emotion through the interactions. Not something I've sort of had the time to get into, but I think, you know, the beauty of the tool is if you can collect the conversation around a topic, you can analyze it.
Yeah.
So, you know, you just have to have an idea, and as long as that's recorded somewhere, whether, you know, it might be that the agent's notes are where they have a bit of a rant about, this is the 5th time I've had this thing, or a survey that you do on you know, how employees are feeling, or that sort of thing. Or, you know, if you wanted to, and they agreed to it, recording feedback sessions, you can pile it all in the same engine and get the sort of same level of analysis onto it. And that makes it really powerful. It's sort of back to that point of, you know, challenging my guys. So what sort of insight do you want? Go and find it. It'll be in there.
No, absolutely. So I'm going to come back to the three of you for your final words, your final piece of advice, your final tip. And I'm going to start with you, Nick, and then go to Marco, and then I'll give Jagrit the final word. So Nick, what's your biggest piece of advice to anybody that's looking at conversational analytics?
So it's a good question. I think it is, you know, particularly, I imagine we have a contact center focused audience today, right? This is something that just unlocks the power of the conversations your advisors are having with your customers. And, you know, if you can tap into that, I go back to when I was an agent myself, thinking just frustrated that I know so much about what people think about our product, but I have no one to share it with. That's been my sort of guiding light with setting this up. It's a way to unlock the value of what your contact center can bring to the rest of the business. If you think of it like that, you're on to something pretty cool.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Marco, over to you. What's your biggest piece of advice, your biggest tip?
I guess to add on what Nick said, right? If you put now the CX lenses on this, you can really help an organization continue to grow. So using any type of conversation analytics channel, contact center, chats, chatbots, etc., you can really help test that customer journey to make sure that you can identify areas of improvement and test your knowledge about your customers, right? That will help you basically create a better organization and stronger products and services. And then leverage all of this technology, right? We talked about AI today, to make sure that you are able to pinpoint those specific areas that should be prioritized with a lot of detail in terms of who should be the responsible person to be able to help make these changes. The nice thing about this from an operational and CX perspective is that if you play your cards correctly, this data can be made available to any organization. So you create a holistic view of the customer journey, and you start breaking silos within the organization as well.
Nice. And Jagrit?
All right, I guess I'll end with two thoughts. So one, I think, firstly, the more the better, right? And when I say the more the better, I think about it from a few different perspectives. The more data, and when I say the more data, the more interactions, right? I think we're seeing more and more organizations going from, small samples of interactions, small samples of calls, to now saying, you know what, we want to analyze all calls, right? And that leads to, like Nick was mentioning, a transparency, a clarity, and also not missing out some key trends, some key innovations that might bubble to the top from a, for example, product innovation perspective, right? So listening to all interactions across all channels, right? Not just calls, chats, emails, SMS. Obviously, there's an explosion in messaging channels right now. WhatsApp is, everybody's using WhatsApp. Let's go ahead and analyze those. And then I think the other aspect of the more is again what Marco and what Nick were alluding to, is the breadth of the use cases. Let's not think about them from the the narrow lens of just some specific operational use cases, but look at the entire breadth of contact center, customer experience, voice of the employee use cases, and figure out which of those can drive value. And then the last thing I'd say, which is, there's been a lot of focus today on insights, right? And I think one of the questions alluded to, okay, some of the organizational aspects of it, and for example, the engagement around those insights. I think that is something that very often organizations overlook and don't make the link from, how do I take an insight and ensure that that insight gets acted upon? That action results in some kind of business outcome, and then that business outcome results in some kind of value. If we just ended the insight, then we're doing everybody a disservice, right? It's only when you sort of figure out that last mile, and I call it not the last mile, but more like the last 10 or 100 miles, right? Is going from insight to action to outcome to value, that you really start seeing sort of the benefits of this. And that's why we love the work that Nick's done at Sky Spain. Is he started with the insights, but very quickly into it, he figured out that I need to be able to document 15, 20 really great examples of how I was able to take that insight, convert it into action, and then document the business value that those insights were driving, right? So let's make sure we do that as well.
Do you know what? I think that's spot on, Jagrit. I think the technology is clearly very powerful. The technology is here, and you can get incredible insights. Those insights are only really valuable if you do something with them.
Exactly.
So I agree with you. So before we lose everybody, because it's now approaching 1 o'clock, thank you very much, Jagrit and Marco from Clarabridge. Thank you very much, Nick, for joining us and being our experts. And just as a final word from me at the CCMA, we've got all sorts of events coming up. We've got all sorts of training programs coming up. And just to really share some of the very next ones, next Tuesday at 12 o'clock, we've got an hour where we're going to be sharing our latest research, looking at the evolution of the contact center. It's a first wave of 3, and having had a sneak peek preview of the results, I think it's worth joining us for that. For our members, we've got a virtual member visit to the AA in September, and we've also got another seminar coming up, online seminar coming up, around driving value from customer satisfaction in the contact center. These are all available on our website, so please go and check it out, www.ccma.org.uk. We've also got training programs that are available, and members do get a discount on that training. Final 2 pieces are the 2 awards programs. We have decided to move the UK National Contact Centre Awards 2020 to a virtual ceremony this year, for all of the obvious reasons. So please join us. It's going to be open to everybody to join us and come and celebrate and really and have an opportunity to get together. I think we all need that at the moment. And the other piece is that the European Contact Centre Customer Service Awards are still open. They are still accepting nominations, but only for another 10 days. They close on the 28th of August. So please check those out. And we've got a number of new categories recognising responding during a crisis. So please do check those out. So from me, from Clarabridge and from Sky, thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.